There we go. And hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in this round spinning world we and I and you and all of us might happen to be at this given moment. And happy New Year's Eve for those of you who are part of that crowd, which includes me, because the whole society I live on runs on that particular idea, that trope of the new year beginning on January 1st. So here we are, a mere 5 hours away from the turnover into 2024. As I said last night, um, in the middle of the night, early this morning, as I said, no offense. I hope most of you have had a good 2023. I am not real thrilled with how 2023 has played out. I won't go into details, but a number of really miserable things have happened in 2023 to me and mine, my friends and loved ones, and us. I mean me. So I will not be sorry to see 2023 in the rear view mirror. That said, I hope for everybody, and this very definitely includes me and mine and my close friends and loved ones, I hope 2024 is great, and I hope a lot of good things happen in 2024 for everybody. That is my wish. Peace on earth, goodwill toward other human beings, all of the above. That's what I want. And if 2024 can even go a slight way toward providing some of that, then I will be able to put aside my bitter grudge against 2023 and 2022. Uh, and I'm not real crazy about 2021 or 2020 either, to be honest with you. But you know, I'm trying to be good spirited about the whole thing. So 2023 and we have agreed to part in 5 hours, and I will do my best to be a gentleman about the whole thing. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Not going to go into details, but just a lot of stuff going on. Saw some good friends today, though, so that was really nice. There's a dog scratching at the door. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. Probably not, but there's a dog scratching at the door because I have the door to the office closed. And the dog wants to know, why is that true? Have I lost my mind? Am I deliberately excluding a dog? That is a form of racism that the dogs in our house will not brook under any circumstances. But I am going to ignore him because he will just come in and then go immediately out again, and it will require me getting up and walking away from the microphone and et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't want to be in here. He just doesn't like the doors closed. I'm sure many of you who have been animal owners, whether dogs, cats, otters, perch, whatever your pet thing might be, have had an animal that's like that just cannot understand why a door would be closed and regarded as a personal insult. Anyway, for those of you just tuning in, or those of you, some tiny number of people who might be flicking across and wondering, who the hell is this guy? What is he babbling about? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I'm Tad. I write books, among other things. And I'm going to be reading from one of my books in a very short time because I don't have a lot to say tonight. As I said, I'm mainly just hanging in there to see 2023 so I can wave goodbye. And then at that point, I will be fully invested in 2024. So I don't have any more parents to lose, but I got lots of friends and other loved ones and family. So I really want them all to stay safe. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm superstitious, or at least for this next few hours, I'm superstitious. But it's been problematic. It's been a problematic year. That said, I personally am doing fine. Deb's doing fine. Our kids, as far as I know, are all doing fine. And so I don't have anything really to relate on that channel. Anything else? No, of course not. It's only been a few weeks since the news broke about the other land thing, and there's nothing new has happened since then because it's the holiday season, and there will not be any news for quite some time probably. You all know I'm working on the third ordinary farm and have been generally making good progress on that. Of course, this time of the year, things just kind of happen, and then you have to do those things. So it has been a little more hit and miss than I would like, and we're going to be moving sometime during the next month, so that will interfere also. But that's not a complaint. That's just a statement of fact. There will be some kind of hiatus, I'm sure, during the process of moving, but I intend to keep reading. And in fact, my current thought, since we got such a long delay, got shoved into the Navigator's Children process. So we originally thought it was going to be coming out in November. This November just passed. And then, from complicated reasons, having not much to do with me, it got put back to next November, because there wasn't a slot earlier than that, which, I wasn't thrilled about, because as far as I'm concerned, the book is mostly pretty much ready. But because of that, and because I'm intending to keep reading for a while, and I still haven't had a chance to put my head above the parapet long enough to figure out what I might do as an alternative to reading, but I don't have that many things to read. I think what I may continue doing, and I'll be interested from feedback from you guys, is I may just keep reading through the new series until, we get to a point where I finish the 3rd volume and the 4th is about to come out. At least I haven't really planned it out or timed it or tried to figure out how that would work. But that's one possibility. So if you think you could stand to hear me reading both Empire of Grass and Into the Narrow Dark before Navigator's Children comes out, let me know. I will certainly take that into account. And if a lot of you go, oh my God, please no, do anything else. Just stop reading altogether or whatever. I will be okay with it. But I'd be interested to get feedback. That's my plan in large part because it seems like it might dovetail nicely with the next book coming out, and everybody would be refreshed if they've been following this with me. And even if they've read the series before, they will be brought up to date when the new one comes out and answers a lot of the questions that have accumulated all the way back to the Dragonbone Chair, because there will be things that come up that are actually dovetailing in on the answers to some things that were never explained in the first series, written back in that far distant time known as the 1980s. So anyway, that's kind of my general plan. I don't have anything more specific to offer than that. As I said, I saw some dear friends today, including at least one who frequently shows up for these readings, which is Jeremy, and Jeremy's brother Jonathan, which was lovely, although I already had another friend over. I go days and days and days without seeing anybody, and then like the buses thing, the old Wendy Cope poem about men are like buses. When you don't want one, they're all over the place. when you are looking for one, they never show up, or something like that. And my friends are a bit like that too. They get used to me being an isolationist, and they stop paying attention to me or trying to cajole me into doing things. And then everybody shows up at the same time. But that was nice. Both things were nice. Both visitations were very nice. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. So let me just check and see if I can read the posts, the people who've showed up and have... Oh, I see. That's still reading. How did that happen? Okay, it'll translate back to this. All right. So before they disappear off of it, I see that Chris has popped in. Chris Fab. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. Joanna. Hello. Good to see you. Becky. Hello. Good to see you too. And Chelsea. And again, I'm guessing on that. That's how it's usually pronounced. But I also know some people who pronounced it Chelsea. So got it. Anyway, so before everybody disappears, let me see who else has popped in and left a comment. I see Chris, and I already said hello, and Becky, who I said hello to, and Chelsea. Claudia, hello. Mahmoud, good to see you. God, and they're disappearing faster than I can read them. Stop it. And also, every time somebody else comes in, then they disappear. James, hello, James. Good to see you. Who else have I not said hello to? Medardo, un placer, señor. Kristen, good to see you. Cliff, hello. I hope you and your family are well. Isaac, good to see you too. A pleasure as always. Kelly, good to see you, Kelly. Susan, thank you for joining me. Nice to have you again. Joanna, I think I already said hello to. Christy, I don't know if I said hello to Christy Sanders yet. I don't believe so. I see Sandra. Sandra showed up. And Ray, hello, Ray. And Eric, hello, Eric. And Tiffany. And this does feel like, what did we always say? It was like romper room. But especially because I'm trying to race faster than the names disappear. Carl, I see Carl. Hello, Carl. And one more. I don't know who that is. I apologize if you are the one that is the and one more, but that's all it gives me. So anyway, I'm going to have to do something about that for next year too. Somebody else suggested, and I forgot who it was because I was trying to race the names as they were dropping off the bottom. Somebody else suggested, or I could read the other land books, and I could do that too. So I'm open to suggestions. We've still got weeks left of a Witchwood Crown, so I'm open to suggestions. Please feel free. And also, as I hope I've made clear over the years, if you have anything you actually want to ask me about or tell me about, my Facebook pages, both of them, are public as far as I know, which means anybody can post on them. It's my friends list is such that I've got like 200 people on it waiting for slots, not because I'm so darn popular, but because the turnover is not fast. So it's hard to get on as a friend, not because I am personally discriminating against you, but I'm trying to take the oldest each time I get a new opening. But I do look in on my pages and check them and stuff, and I try to answer any questions or any comments that seem to require some kind of answer. I try to also just answer casual comments as well, but that's not always possible. So anyway, so please don't hesitate. If you ever have something you want to ask me or put to me in some shape or form, or even a ransom demand or something, just drop me something on Facebook and I will do my best to get back to you. Deb has been largely managing the Twitter account because I have a different, I'm in a different mode with Twitter than Deb is, but she's invested a lot of her life on it. So even though it's not Twitter anymore, she's still doing it. Whereas I was always more tentatively involved. So Elon Musk has driven me off of it entirely. But so Deb does pass things along to me too when people post something on Twitter, especially anything that needs an answer, and we try to get it answered. Anyway, okay, so I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. I am now going to start reading. So we are back to Witchwood Crown, and we are starting chapter 19. So we're getting along pretty well. I can't remember how many chapters there are, but I think they're like 50 or 52. So you can have a rough idea of how long we're going to be working on this book still. Chapter 19, The Moon's Token. King Simon was in a good mood, Eolair noted, and that was a fine thing. The Queen, too, was pleased that after months of travel they were finally on their way home to Erkenland. In fact, of all the royal party, only Prince Morgan seemed off his feed, or off his drink, to be more precise, and Eolair had been told why. Benebic's daughter, Kina, and her man, little Snennek, had apparently exacted a promise from Morgan not to drink too much due to an evening expedition they had planned. Unlike the illicit skating expedition, this foray had been approved ahead of time, although Queen Miriamel's consent had been reluctant. The king had only convinced her by saying, "A bit of exertion will be good for him. You don't want him to be a weakling king who can lift nothing heavier than an ale cup, do you?" So, as the hand of the high throne watched with qualified sympathy, the prince drank nothing but watered wine that was more water than wine. Outside, the evening had finally grown quiet, although the wind had howled and the snow flown all day. Yet another surprise spring storm had caught the royal party in open land west of the Dimmerskog forest, forcing them off the Venveg and onto the unsuspecting hospitality of one Baron Narvi. Narvi was an old knight of Rimmersgard blood, as attested by his name, and the fair hair of his youthful portrait in the outer hall, but he spoke the Westerling tongue better than he spoke Rimmersbach, and kept court at his tower house of Radfisk Foss in the spare eastern Erkenlandish manor, with whitewashed walls and little ornamentation. The latter might have been as much due to penury as inclination. The Frostmarch borders were not rich territories at the best of times, and the salmon, on which the baron's household made the largest part of their living, had not yet begun the year's journey. Thus nobody, Least of all, Baron Narvi himself had expected the king and queen to stop and take shelter at his modest castle just south of the forest, above a steep river gorge where the Vestven River hurried down toward the distant sea. But the beginning of Avril had brought harsh weather instead of sunshine, and although everybody in the royal party was now aching to get back to the Hayholt, they had been traveling since John Aver and the turn of the year, nobody wanted to risk trying to cross the wilderness of the Eastern Frost March in the middle of a snowstorm. Narvi, his lady wife, and his retainers were thrilled to entertain the royal couple, if somewhat ashamed of the meager fare they could offer. But, as at Blarbreck Castle, Jeremias supplemented the local supplies with stores from the High Throne's traveling household, ensuring everybody had plenty to eat and drink. Radfisk Foss was too poor a house to keep its own jugglers and musicians, so the landlords were delighted that the king and queen had brought entertainment of their own, including tumblers, one of whom could also juggle knives, and, of course, a harper. Renan found himself with the most eager audience he had met since leaving Erkenland. As the evening went along and the wine flowed, the young bard performed not just Erkenlandish songs, but new ones he had learned in Hernistir and Rimmersgard during the journey. The queen even joined him, lending her unpolished but sweet voice to She Is Ever Fair, earning herself and the harper a round of enthusiastic applause. Those shining lads and lasses will grow wan with age and care, but she walks on through all the years, and she is ever fair. At last, shortly before midnight, the Baron and Baroness excused themselves. "You have given us both honor and delight, your majesties," said Narvi, "but we are not used to such hours. Can we not persuade you to take our bed? It is not what you are used to, but it is the best in the house." "Nonsense," said Simon, his tongue just the smallest bit fuzzy with drink. "You have treated us admirably, my good lord. Our men-at-arms are comfortable in the stables, and we shall sleep in the hall here." Miriamel smiled and thanked them too, but she looked as though she might have preferred to take Narvi up on his offer of the best bed. Eolair, who seldom woke in the morning without some new aches apparently acquired in sleep, understood the queen's reluctance, but it was a pleasure to see Simon in a good mood, which was exactly what the wine and music and the roaring fire had given him. Soon enough, King Simon, the trolls, and some of the others began trading old, largely true stories of the Storm King's War. The king much preferred that sort of tale, Eolair knew, especially those that painted Simon himself not as a hero, but as the mooncalf boy he had once been. His pleasure in his own youthful foolishness seemed to grow with each cup of wine. "I was nothing when we started out. Do you remember, Miri? I was a kitchen boy, green as grass, a kitchen boy." "Yes, Simon," said Miriamel with a tiny smile for Bennebic. "I think that is reasonably well known to all." "But you were a kitchen boy of considerable braveness," said Bennebic. "Like it or not, not many would do the things you did, I am thinking." Siski murmured something to him, and Bennebic nodded. "My wife reminds me that you risked your life for me many times, even in our home on Mintahok, when my own people had condemned me." Simon made a face. "Tired of talking about me. Where's Morgan? Tell him about his Grimner. Tell him how his Grimner met me first time, tied over the back of a horse, with my arse in the air." He laughed. "There's glory for you. There's glory." He peered around again. "Morgan should be hearing what a picture his grandfather made, riding upside down on Sludig's saddle." He frowned. "But I don't see him." "He has gone out," Miriamel said. "Marching around in the snow with Kina and her young man. Don't you remember?" "Little Snenek and Kina are taking him to see something," said Bennebic. "Mysterious they were making it." "Which is why I made him take the guards," said the queen. Do you truly not remember this, husband?
Gone out in this weather? To see what?
Simon finished his cup and bumped it against the table until one of the servants poured him some more. What is better than hearing about how his grandfather was carried around the frost march, draped over a saddle like a Hyrka bride? He tried to demonstrate the position, but overtipped and would have fallen off the bench had not Sir Kenrick caught his arm. I think it may be time we all had some sleep, said Miriamel. At first the king seemed inclined to argue, but a closer look at his wife's expression convinced him not to.
Very well, he said. What is wrong with a few musing stories, though, I'd like to know?
As the king and Miriamel made their way across the hall to the sleeping spot prepared for them, and the rest of the courtiers and guards began to disperse, Binnabic approached the royal couple and took Simon's elbow. The troll seemed to be holding something in his hand. Eolair was caught between curiosity and his wish to give the royal couple their privacy, but he could not shrug off his first impulse, which was to know all the High Throne's business.
I have something for you, friend Simon, said Binnabic. Wear it close to you when you sleep.
Miriamel stared at the thing in Binnabic's hand with obvious distaste. What is it?
It is a talisman that I have been making to help Simon find his dreams again, or to help the dreams find him.
Her husband reached for it, but she pulled his hand back.
No, it's ugly. It scares me.
The king's safety outweighing any kind of discretion, Eolair stepped forward for a closer look. The object nestled in Binnabic's leathery palm was a bundle of bones, dried flowers, and black feathers tied together with thread.
I mean no offense, Binnabic, said the count, but I like this no more than the queen. Those are crow feathers, are they not? Remember, such things are sacred to Morga, the Dark Mother. My people had to drive her worshippers out of our midst, and lately we have heard her evil name again in worrying circumstances.
The troll gave him a serious look.
Not the same at all, I am thinking, and we stand this night in Rimmersgard, not Hernistir. Things are being different in the north. Among my people, the crow is the messenger of all who are beyond the sky, Count Eolair, not just one cruel goddess. This is to help Simon's dreams find him once more.
I don't care, Miriamel began, but Simon pulled his hand from her grip and took the bundle of feathers and bones with exaggerated care, then stared at it with slightly cross-eyed intensity.
I will wear it tonight, he said. If there are answers for us on the dream road as there were in the past, then I want to know them.
He lifted his hand to forestall his wife and the Lord Steward.
No, don't scold me. Binnabic is my friend, and I trust him. His cleverness has saved me many a time. Still, the queen is not wrong to fear, and neither is Count Eolair, the troll said. Nothing is being simple where the dream road is in the matter. Let me come to you when you wake, so you can tell me if you begin your dreaming once more.
Simon nodded and let his wife draw him away toward their makeshift bedchamber, a frame of screens at the far end of the hall. Miriamel looked decidedly unhappy, and Eolair could not entirely blame her. Too many old stories and portents were in the wind, in a way not seen since the days of the Storm King's rise. Yes, the new snow falls, but when it melts, all that has been hidden comes back to the light, he thought. Does nothing ever truly change? If I may say so, Highness, Sir Porto began, wheezing clouds of vapor like smoke from a hayfield fire. And I mean no disrespect to the king's and queen's honorable troll friends, but
The first wave of the storm had passed just after sunset. The sky was clear, but the hill path was almost obscured by fresh drifts. Morgan was laboring so hard to follow the two nimble trolls up the narrow, slippery way, and doing so by moonlight in addition to everything else, that he did not answer for some time. "What?" he said at last. "What? Out with it." "I think this is a foolish adventure, Prince Morgan." The old knight seldom spoke so forcefully. "We are getting quite high up in the hills now. The guards have fallen a long distance behind us, and I am no longer the climber I was in my youth." "You're doing well, though," Morgan said, secretly glad for the chance to catch his own breath. "You are kind, Highness, but that misses my point. I don't know what these people from Yiknik plan for you, but I think we should go back." Morgan sucked in enough air to make a derisive noise. "Pfft, nobody forced you to come, Porto. Even Astrian and Ulvers had the good sense to stay inside where it's warm, and you can see how much my guards are worried about me, sitting on a rock down there somewhere. If you don't like it, go join them." But even as he said it, Morgan was having his own second thoughts. He had supposed Snenick and Kina simply meant to take him out walking, perhaps to look at another frozen lake. The young trolls had a strange love of being out of doors when more sensible people were sitting around a fire. Instead, he found himself climbing up into the dark, slippery, stony hills for reasons they wouldn't yet explain to him. If his grandmother and grandfather knew he was endangering himself this way, they would doubtless be furious again. But somehow, for that very reason, he was determined not to turn back, not to give up and go home like a child who could not keep up with his elders. "But I can't leave you," the old knight said with breathless indignation. "You are my liege." "That didn't stop the guards, did it? And I'm not your liege, anyway." Morgan looked up the path and saw Snenick and Kina high on the slope above him now, little more than moving shadows against the stars and the black sky. "My grandmother and grandfather are your lieges. I'm only the heir. And if I fall off this damnable mountain and die, then it's even more certain I won't be anyone's liege." "Highness!" Porta was horrified and made the tree sign with vigor. "Do not say such things, even in jest." "Very well, but I am going on, so if you are too, it's time to get on your feet." They did not make it much farther up the mountainside before Sir Porto, weary and light-headed, lost his balance yet again, and this time nearly fell down the long, steep slope. Kina, who by this point had circled back and was walking behind him, caught the old man's arm and steadied him until he could find a safe spot to sit down. "It must be easier to be so small," said Porto as he watched little Snenick trotting back down the path toward them. "Every time I stand up, I want to fall backward down the hill." "This good place for old Porto Knight, I am thinking." Kina herself seemed quite fresh, her breathing even and not particularly deep, as she shrugged off her pack and pulled out a woolen blanket. She had to stand on tiptoe to wrap it around the tall old man, even though Porto was sitting on a low slab of rock. "Now you have warm until we come back." "But what will I tell the king and queen if something happens?" "Nothing." Morgan was taking the opportunity to suck air deep into his lungs and shake snow out of his boots. "All will go well. The trolls will show me what they wish to show me. Then we'll come back, and you and I will have a warming cup together. Or several, since I denied myself earlier." "Now we must move again," said Snenick, who seemed just as unwearied as Kina. The top of his head might only reach Morgan's chest when they stood side by side, but they were roughly the same size around the middle, and though his legs were short, his arms were almost as long as the prince's. "In fact, he's made for climbing," Morgan thought. "Made for falling me. Come, friend Morgan, Snenick said. "Follow us." "Remind me again why I came with you?" he asked. "Because I said I would show wonders to you," the troll told him. "Ah, yes, of course." He patted Sir Porto on his blanketed shoulder and said with a confidence he did not wholly feel, "Be brave, old campaigner. We'll be back very soon." "Morgan Prince," called Snenick from somewhere above. "Almost we have reached a stopping place." "Oh, praise the Adon." Morgan was feeling the cold badly now and wishing he had drunk a great deal less water and a great deal more wine. "We're at the stopping place?" "No," said Snenick. "We are almost at a stopping place." They scrambled up another bank of loose rock and then picked their way along a scarp that looked so narrow, though it was wider across than his shoulders, that Morgan sat down and inched along it like a child learning to crawl. He could see the lights of Radfisk Foss far below them now, obscured by the trees at the base of the slope, and looking quite unreachably distant. "Here is not for lingering," called Snenick, despite the fact that he had just taken off his pack. "Our slowness makes me worry." "Yes, well, I'm not all that happy myself," said Morgan. He was quite disinterested in the whole adventure now. If it had not been for the full moon, the four of them would have been climbing these perilous heights in darkness. He had been finding the company of Astrian and Ulvaris a bit flat of late. The night seemed to be doing nothing more than waiting for the journey to end, but he was beginning to think it was not such a good idea to let the trolls call the dance either. "Snenick, why are we here? In fact, where are we going?" "It is not just a where," little Snenick said. "It is having more importance for when." "Oh, God save me from mad trolls." Morgan sat down on the broad ledge. "That is enough. We'll go back now." True, it is only being a little more far," said Kina. "Do not be feared, Highness Prince." "Prince Morgan. No, just Morgan. Simpler. What is only a little more far?" "The top," Snenick explained. "But first you must be putting these on." He pulled an oilskin bundle out of his pack and began to unwrap it. He set a pair of climbing irons before Morgan, then took the other for himself. Kina had already donned hers in what seemed less than a moment. It made Morgan feel dizzied. "Go, too," Snenick urged him. "You are remembering how, yes? But this time not for ice sliding, only climbing." The troll laughed so loud he blew snow from the fur around his hood. "What did you call it? Scatting? Skating? We will not be doing that tonight, I think." He paused, waiting for a response, grinning widely. At last he said, in a slightly injured tone, "That was a fine joke, you must admit." "Do singing men have to be good at jokes?" Morgan asked, swearing silently as he knotted his cold fingers in a rawhide thong by accident. "A singing man must be skilled in all things," Snenick said with high seriousness. "Herding and hunting, making and finding, leaving and coming back again. He must travel so quietly the rabbits do not hear him pass. He must speak the languages of people and of animals and of storms. He must speak when the moon is climbed too high," said Kina with a stern look. "By the mountain's daughter, she is right," Snenick said. "You have kept me too long in conversing, Morgan Prince. Now we must go swiftly. Do not worry, Kina and myself will see you there safely." "But where is there?" Morgan asked, getting cautiously onto his feet. At least this time the odd weight and protrusion of the climbing spikes felt almost familiar. "I will tell you as we climb," Snenick said. "Come." If Morgan had feared some deathly scramble up a sheet of solid ice, he need not have feared. The path became steeper, and the spikes on his feet did help him not to slide, but even though they seemed to be climbing an endless slope, he never felt he was in serious danger of a fall. Dying from a burst heart, though, seemed a definite possibility. "Now, hear me, Morgan Prince," Snenick told him, slowing down just enough that Morgan could hear him, if he worked hard to stay close. "Here is something I wish to be saying about your unhappiness." "My unhappiness? What unhappiness?" Snenick waved his hand. "I will one day be a singing man of Mintahok. Such things are clear to me as icy mountain water. Now, have you seen my ram that I ride? Big, is he not? He is called Falku, which in Kanok speak means the tasty white fat. Not because I would eat him, but because he has much of it. Biggest of the rams, he always was." Already Morgan had lost the troll's point, but he only had the strength to groan, which did not slow Snenick at all. As far as Morgan knew, his only current unhappiness was that of being stuck in the breathless heights of the mountain with two tiny mad people who liked to climb icy slopes. "But because my ram was biggest," Snenick continued, now actually turned around so he could face Morgan and climb backward as he talked, "all the others must test their strength against him. Always he was fighting. On his horns are the marks of many battles, so it always must be. I am thinking, the one who stands tallest cannot live the life of the small ones. Do you see some meaning there?" Morgan had been scowling in discomfort so long his mouth was almost frozen into that shape. "The only meaning I see is that you are meaning to kill me." He paused, trying to make sense of the troll's words. "Do you mean to say you hate me because I'm taller than you?" "Ha!" Snenick now added thigh-slapping to his backward maneuvers. "You see, you too can make jests, almost as well as mine." He shook his head. "No, as good as mine. Almost." "Snenick Henima, not so. Talk now." Keena's firm tone surprised Morgan, who sometimes forgot she was only child small, not an actual child. "Let Morgan Prince reach the top before you make more words." Snenick frowned, but turned around and resumed climbing, this time with what was clearly intended as quiet dignity. A time passed in silence, but for Morgan's noises of discomfort. Finally, little Snenick called back, "We are now where we should be, and the time is still fresh, but we must hurry." Morgan did his best to pick up the pace, and at last, with an assist from Keena in the form of her small shoulder pushing against his hindquarters, he half climbed, half fell forward onto the hill's wide crest. Nothing before or above him now but a sky bespattered with stars, and at its center, like a great wheel with which to steer the ship of the firmament, the pale full moon. Morgan fell to his knees in relief, then quickly adjusted his position until he was not poking himself with his own spikes. "Is that it?" he asked when he had regained his breath. Even with his scarf around his head, his ears were so cold it was hard to keep his voice calm. "You brought me up here to look at the moon? I've seen the moon. We have the same moon in Erkenland, you know." He was so tired he almost felt like crying. Not that he would have, especially in front of these small, near strangers. Keena sat down beside him, and little Snenick settled in on the other side, so that they all looked out together across the snow-shrouded foothills. To Morgan's right, the dark Dimmerskog forest stretched away, like the rumpled pelt of an immense animal, the tips of its trees silvered by moonlight. "It is fine to see all this, is it not?" asked Snenick. "Others are wishing they could see so far, but only those who have climbed high can have this seeing." Morgan huddled deeper in his cloak. Nobody is wishing they could see so far, because nobody with any sense wants to be sitting on top of a mountain at night freezing. Is so bad for true? Asked Kina softly. What you see, Highness Morgan? He swallowed a snappish reply. He had to admit that the moon looked astoundingly large from this vantage and felt close enough to touch. All of creation seemed laid before him like one of the paintings on the chapel wall back home in the hayhold. No, it's not so bad, I suppose, he said. But I still didn't need to climb up so high just to see it. But you did, yes, with certainty, said little Snenick. Not just to understand what others wish they could see, others who cannot climb so high as princes, but also because of what tonight is being. Again, Morgan bit back cross words. Something about the trolls was so different that he could not treat them as he did his other friends, whom he mocked and was mocked by in turn. Well, except for Porto, he thought, who never mocks me. This reminded him that the old soldier was still waiting for them down below on the cold hillside. Whatever the trolls had planned, it would be cruel to the poor old fellow to drag it out any longer by arguing. Very well. Tell me, what is tonight being, Snenick? He laughed despite his chattering teeth. I mean, what is tonight? Seda's token, the troll said promptly. That is what we cannot name it. Seda is being the moon, and if you see the biggest great belly moon of springtime, what you call full moon, from the top of a high, high place, before it starts its journey down into the dark again, Seda will give to you a token of the truth. Morgan looked at him for a long moment. Your pardon, but I didn't understand a word you just said. Here, on this night, in this high place, we will cast the bones. You know how a Canuck singing man casts the bones, do you not? Surely your grandfather has told you after his long traveling with Kina's father, Binabik. The idea sounded dimly familiar, but Morgan could not bear another long explanation, not with the cold scraping at his ears and nose and fingertips. Yes, he said, casting the bones, of course. Good. Snenick produced a leather-wrapped bundle from his heavy jacket, then brushed away the snow that lay before him on the rocky summit to make a bare patch. He tumbled several small, pale objects from the pouch into his hand. The moon has a full belly, and we are in a high place. We shall ask Seda for a token for you. Why? Because you are in need of guidance, I am thinking. Kina and her father agree. Morgan bristled a little at the idea, but reminded himself that Cole didn't care who thought what, and asked instead, why would this Seda bother with someone who isn't a troll? Because she is the mother of all people, who wants only to keep her children safe. While Snenick began a whispered prayer in his own throaty tongue, Morgan thought briefly and a bit sourly about his own mother, whose desires seemed a great deal more complicated than those of Seda, the Moon Mother. After some moments, Snenick tossed the bones as if they were a handful of dice, then squinted with keen interest at the way they fell. Patience, my prince friend. 2 more times must I cast them, he said. When he had finished, Snenick slowly gathered up the little bones and tipped them back into the leather pouch. The Black Crevice and Clouds in the Pass. Those were the first 2. But the third was one I have not seen to fall before. I wonder if Kina's father has even cast it, though he taught it to me. Unnatural Birth, it is called. Morgan was shivering again, despite the presence of small, solid people squeezed against him on either side. Oh, that's charming. Are your bones calling me a bastard? The troll shook his head. That is not what the words are meaning. Or do you joke again? No, by what I have learned, they signify that something you expect, something you have long expected, will not come to you, or will come, perhaps, but in much different form than you had been thinking. He frowned and weighed the sack of bones in his palm. I think I should be speaking with Kina's father about this, because even I, clever as I certainly am, perhaps do not understand everything about this. Clever you am, yes, said Kina, and full of humble. Morgan heard the deep fondness beneath the gentle mockery and almost envied Snennek such a forgiving love, but he was distracted by wondering what this whole adventure had been about. This was exactly why Father Nullies warned against fortune-telling. Of course, that it was not only foreign and sinful, but never accurate. Because if the troll's words were true, something he had long expected would not come to him, and that could only mean the kingdom. A prince and heir who does not become king, he thought, like my father, who died young. Are we finished then? He asked out loud, doing his best to keep his voice level. Because I am so cold you may have to carry me down in a casket if we stay up here much longer. The trolls were quiet on the long way back down to where Porta was waiting. That was fine with Morgan, who had nothing to say and no urge to hear anything more until he had poured a sufficiency of wine into his belly to thaw his frozen heart. Despite his weariness, and a great deal of drink, as well as the comfort of Baron Narvi's bed that had been provided, it took Simon a long time to fall asleep in the middle of the great hall, with so many of his courtiers and servants sleeping around him. It had been long since he had slept like this, surrounded by many others, hearing so many taking breath, murmuring, even talking in the depths of dreams. As he lay in the dark, clutching Benebic's talisman, the sounds they made plunged him back into memories of his youth, when he had slept piled with the other kitchen scullions, like so many loaves. Let me read that one again. As he lay in the dark, clutching Benebic's talisman, the sounds they made plunged him back into memories of his youth, when he had slept piled in with the other scullions, like so many loaves rising in the vast Hayholt kitchen. Simon supposed that thinking of the past had somehow led him there, because soon he found himself roaming through the dark corridors and shaded grounds of that self-same Hayholt, the great castle where he had grown up. To his surprise, the silent girl Lelith, that he and Miriamel had known so long ago, was with him, as if she and he had both been drawn to this lost place by some powerful call. He wanted to ask her what brought her back to the Hayholt, where she had once been Miriamel's handmaiden before the evil days descended on the castle, but the girl would not stay for him, no matter how he called. Always she hurried just ahead, her skirts swaying as she moved in and out of the shadows, like a leaf caught on the breeze. He followed Lelith down a long covered passage that was a bit like the old tunnel between the stables and the outer keeps, but somehow was also a tree-canopied path through the woods around Dai Chiquiza, the fairy city that had been swallowed by Aldhart forests centuries before Simon had been born. He and Miriamel and Benebic had floated through its dappled green tangle on a boat Velada Jaloy had given them. Lelith had not been with them on that real journey, since she had been attacked by savage Norn hounds while fleeing the Hayholt, had nearly died from her wounds, and had never found her voice again. When Simon and the others left Jaloy, who had given them all shelter and counsel, the little girl had stayed behind with the wise woman. In later days, Simon had sometimes seen Lelith again in dreams, both the waking and sleeping sort, so it was not too surprising to encounter her now in this strange place full of shadows and half-ghosts. And only in dreams had Simon ever heard her voice, as he heard it again now. Beware the children, she called back to him. They are being called. What children? He asked, or thought he did, but his dream was full of voices, and he was not sure if he had truly spoken. What children? Lella stepped through a gaping archway that Simon was sure had not been there a moment before, a dark space between two trees. All that remained was her voice. The children! It floated to him as though from the depths of a forgotten well. They are dead. But even as those words chilled him, he thought he might be mistaken, that she might have called something else from the darkness. The children are death, or the children all dread. Lilith, where are you? He cried. What are you saying? But the darkness between the trees was empty and silent. Still moving in dreamy half-flight, as though only his eyes and ears were alive and connected to his teeming, confused thoughts, he followed her into the empty, dark place, even as a part of him saw where he was going and tried desperately to stop him. It's a cave, he thought. It's a hole. There's a monster inside it. It's a grave. Indeed, somehow he knew that what had first seemed only a shadow between two tree trunks was something quite different. A passage lined with crumbling earth. Just when his terror became so great that he could not imagine going any farther, a line glowed into existence before him, a vertical stripe of light, like a single sunbeam arrowing down to earth. His fear suddenly lessened. He found himself moving toward it, and as he did, the light spread side to side, like great radiant butterfly wings, but for one clot of black near the bottom. A part of him understood that the glowing butterfly was made by doors opening in a dark room, allowing light to pour in, but at first it illuminated nothing. Then he saw that the clot of blackness was something standing in that light. After a moment, Simon recognized it as a child's shape, a familiar child's shape. John Joshua? He moved closer. The boy stood motionless in the open doorway, arms spread to hold the doors open. Sleeping figures lay everywhere before the child's feet, and Simon was confused. Somehow he had found his way back to the old dormitory where the scullions slept. But what was John Joshua doing here? He had never been a kitchen worker like his father. In fact, it was strange that he could be a child at the same time Simon himself was somehow a child. Had time itself been tipped sideways? Son? He took a few steps closer, but John Joshua seemed deep in thought. Simon did not look down. He was afraid to take his eyes off his son, but stepped as carefully as he could over the sleeping figures that lay between them. Some of the sleepers stirred and groaned, but none of them awoke. Now he noticed another puzzle. For some reason, the floor of the great kitchen was covered with grass. It even seemed to be growing on top of the sleepers. John Joshua? Simon drew nearer and now could see the boy's head well enough to recognize the unforgettable swirl of his cowlick. He thought he would collapse under the weight of terror and joy. What had brought him back? And was he to be Simon's son again, or was Simon now to be his? John Joshua had died, but Simon hadn't. Who was oldest? The children are waking up, Lella's voice called from somewhere, faint as a soft breeze through an unmown field. They are being summoned back. Beware! Some of the sleepers stirred, moving restlessly under the thick blanket of green that now covered them. Simon took one more step until he was close enough to touch the child's shape, and reached out to cup John Joshua's chin in his hands, to look his lost son in the face. But when he turned to his father, the child's eyes were black, the empty black of nothingness, of the end of all things. Simon tried to scream, but couldn't. Suddenly, the boy, his son, began to vanish, draining away into the ground like dark water from a leaking cistern. Only as Simon clutched at the vanishing essence did he finally discover his voice, crying his only child's name over and over, even as John Joshua became nothingness. He was surrounded by lights, flickering, unsteady lights. The torches were all around him, and more were coming like fiery birds hastening to a shared meal. So bright! He blinked and realized he was holding something in his hands. He looked and saw his fingers were clutching a scrap of white fabric. "Simon!" It was Miriamel from somewhere behind him. The light was in his eyes, and he was confused, aching. John Joshua! He had held him, had, if only for a sliver of an instant, touched his dead son again, and here was proof. "Simon!" his wife cried. "Wake up!" She stood before him now, her familiar face the only ordinary thing in a mob of strangers. He was surrounded, and for a startled moment he felt like a beast at bay, crowded by the hunters who would take his life. Then he saw that one of them was a woman, her arms around a boy of no more than 6 or 7 years, a slender child with something of John Joshua's leanness but darker hair. The child was crying, and his nightshirt was in tatters. Simon realized with growing horror that the child's gown was made of the same material as the torn scrap in his hand. "What?" Simon looked around, saw Tiamat and a few others he recognized, found Miri again. "What happened here?" His wife took his arm and led him away from the great double doors back into the depths of the hall. "You had a dream, husband, a very bad dream." "John Joshua. I thought he was John Joshua come back. Lilith tried." Simon could not remember all that had happened, but he was certain it was important. "It's the children. Lilith tried to tell me. Lilith is more than 210 years gone," Mary said, and although she sounded angry, Simon could hear something else in her voice too, something like fear, almost terror. "Never mind her. You scared that poor child to death. He was only coming into the hall to see if there was any food left from supper." "Oh, sweet Osiris," Simon said, his gut suddenly icy cold. "What did I do? Did I hurt him?" "Just tore his night clothes. He said you called him son. That's how I knew." She helped him to lie back down on the well-stuffed bed. "A bad dream. I am more angry with Benedict for giving you that thing than I am with you." Simon shook his head. Part of him was relieved it hadn't been real, but part of him was not willing to let go. "It wasn't all a dream. I don't think it was. I think, what did Lilith say? The children are dead. I think that's what it was. Or was it the children are summoned?" "Shh." Mary put her hand against his lips. The fingers were cool and soothing, but her voice was less so. "No more talk, husband. You have frightened everyone quite enough." "I will not sleep," he said. "How can I? That was no mere dream." "It was one of the Baron's little grandnephews," said the Queen. "How could it have been anything else? Our John Joshua is gone. By the 8 on sweet mother, you know that, Simon? John Joshua is in heaven with Osiris and God's angels. Why should he be roaming the earth? You know he is at rest." She reached for his hand, pried open his fingers. "Give that to me." She took the talisman of feathers and flowers that Benedict had made him and threw it to the floor, then ground it beneath her heel, the small bones crunching like twigs. "I will burn it in the morning," she said. Simon wanted to argue, but he felt as though he had fallen asleep in one country and awakened in another. "But I saw our son. Demons can take familiar shapes. Enough. Go back to sleep. Simon let his head fall back against the pallet and tried to concentrate on Mary's fingers stroking his brow. He could feel her fear and wondered why she was so frightened. Just a dream, she says. He was already feeling muddled in the dark behind his closed eyelids. She's right. What else could it be? When he fell back into sleep, Simon did not dream again, or if he did, there was no trace of it in his memory when he woke. And that is the end of chapter 19. And coincidentally, conveniently, I'd like to say it was my perfect planning, but it is not. It is now 8 o'clock, and I am going to sign off for the evening. So, not only am I going to sign off, but I'm going to take this opportunity once more to wish you a happy New Year's Eve and a happy New Year's, to say I look forward to sharing more time with you all in the upcoming year, and I thank you very much for your support and your kindness. It has been a difficult year for me and for many others, but kindness goes a long way toward patching up the cares and woes that human flesh is heir to. So I appreciate it. I hope you will take good care of yourselves, not just today and in the next few days, but all through 2024. And your friends, loved ones, neighbors, everybody, we will take care of each other. That's the only way this is going to work. So again, thank you for joining me. Peace. Have a very good night. Have a very good end of 2023 and have a great 2024. And I will see you almost certainly next week. So